You're listening to Help Me, I'm a Comedian. It's a show where we ask a comedian to come in and share something difficult from their life and how they got through it, and see if there's any insights for the rest of us. You're also joined in that endeavour by psychologist Dr. Rachel Hannam and comedian Daniel Holt. The story today is one about creating a good life for yourself, even when you've had a very difficult childhood. So to share that story, Daniel, hello.
Hello, how you going, everyone?
Good, thanks.
Hi, Daniel.
Can you tell us about your story and the childhood you grew up in?
Yeah, of course. So essentially, I grew up in Sheffield, England. It was in one of the most poorest parts of the city with the highest crime rate. I was born in a council estate, so it's government funded and everything like that. And I was raised with mostly a single mother. So yeah, she suffered through depression, a lot of mental health problems, and raised 4 kids. I'm one of 4. My dad was never around. He was an abusive alcoholic. I'm mixed race, so my dad's Indian and my mum's English. He had 2 kids, myself and my older brother. And yeah, whenever he was around, he had a huge drinking problem, and yeah, he would be abusive to the family. So I grew up with family violence and domestic violence, growing up in that situation. Eventually my mum moved away from my father because he wasn't a great role model, let's say, but ended up running back into trouble again with my stepdad, who was a racist. So didn't bode well for me being Indian.
No.
I'll be honest, yeah, didn't go too well. So
Can we start with that story of growing up in the council estate and with your dad who wasn't around? Are there any specific stories that you can share that sort of paint a picture of what your life was like in that world?
yeah, so I grew up, so in the council estate, essentially there was like no carpets on the floor. There was no door handles, like literally, like the bare minimum. There wasn't there. Like, say if I was to take a bath, I'd have to take a butter knife with me just because like I'd get locked in. So you'd have to like open the door with a butter knife. And like we grew up so poor that like my mom would tell me my birthday's on a different day because she couldn't buy me any presents. And I'd be like, Mom, I'm sure it's my birthday today. And she'd be like, no, it's another day. And I'd be like, oh, okay. After a few years, I kind of was like, it's definitely my birthday today. I'm sure about that.
Yeah.
And then, my father was never really around, growing up. And I really struggled with that as a young kid because when people was with both parents or, having that family life, like you watch a Christmas movie and all the family's around singing carols and everything. I didn't have that. I had the complete opposite. So it used to bring me to tears a lot as a kid, like when I'd hear even the word father. Until I got to know him, essentially, which he kind of came back into my life roughly when I was about 10 for a bit. Like, my mum gave me a chance to finally meet him, got in contact somehow, and then got to meet him, and then I ended up meeting him, and I remember meeting him in the centre of Sheffield. Like, I ran up to him, and he was like this big giant of a man, and he lifted me up really high, and I was like, oh, it's my dad, and it seemed like all my dreams of what a father would be in one moment. Until I got to know him. Then after a while, like being around him, you saw there was drinking habits. Even though I was young, he'd always have like a bottle of alcohol next to him, or he'd smell of alcohol. And whenever he would drink, he would just be hugely aggressive. Like I remember a story once where we was all in bed. I was going to school the next day, and he tried to break in our house just because he just wanted to come in and like rule the house. Like it's like he wanted to take control, like he always did with my mom or family. And he was trying to break down the door, and my mom was trying to shout through the window, like, just go away, but she was too terrified because she knew if he got in what would happen, so she was trying to ring the police. I went to the window to tell him to go away, and as I go to the window, I look down at him, and I'm like, I never call him by dad, I call him by his name, Armajit. So I was like, Armajit, can you go away? And he looked up, and he was like, which one are you? And he didn't know whether I was Tommy, his oldest son, or me, and I was like, I'm Dan, by the way. And yeah, can you still go away? Can you move on, sort of thing? But he was that drunk, he didn't know. And moving on later into life, I didn't really see him much anymore, but I'd be with my friends around about 18 in the city, like when you first start going out and hanging around with friends and stuff. And I'd just walk past him, and I'd be like to my friends, that's my dad. And he wouldn't even recognise me. Did not have a clue, just walked straight past. And I kind of lost, I don't have any connection to him anymore. Like, I legit have no feeling of love, sadness, anger, or anything. He's just kind of cut off. It's just like
Indifferent.
Yeah, there's no kind of emotion towards him. I remember at 19 I actually went to talk to him. So I was in a 7-Eleven style shop, just getting some stuff, and then my friend came in and he was like, don't go outside, your dad's outside. And I was like, oh, is he really? And I was like, you know what, I'm actually going to go out and talk to him. I'm 19 now. I was like, let's go out and see. And I went out to him, and I was like, I kind of was being a bit, forward. I was just like, you owe me money. And he was like, what? And I was like, you owe me money. And then he just started to snarl and get aggressive. And he came at me and he was basically wanting to fight me. He didn't know who I was until I said, oh, I'm Claire's son, my mom, Claire. And he was like, oh, you're my son. Oh, I love you so much and all this. And just switched to this endearing person that I knew he was not at all. And I was like, do you know what? I'm going to give you, a chance to have your say. I've seen what you've done. I've heard from my mom and my brother about what you've done. But, I'll have a one-on-one conversation. So he was like, okay, cool. We walked away from the shop to a little park where it's just me, him, and some random fella, like who he knew. And I just said to him, right, can you just explain your story? Like why you did what you did or who you are kind of as a person. I'll let you have a chance for once. And he started off the conversation by, okay, cool. So how it is, son, if women are out of line, you have to beat them in place. And I just went, whoa, stop right there. And that was enough for me to go, I don't want anything to do with you. I was like, that's enough for me. I just literally was like, mate, I'm never going to be anything like you. Your story, everything you've been about, you've lost me, you've lost mom, you've lost your family due to alcoholism or drugs or any negative, thing he's been involved in. He's lost a lot of things. And I was just saying, I won't be a product of that, like my brother was. Unfortunately, my brother grew up with my dad more than me, and he had to suffer through the abuse like my mom did with the family violence. And him growing up, it ended up affecting him to grow up and want to be a bigger man and want to kind of defend himself from everyone in all aspects. So he tried to be like the hard guy on the estate. This is my brother, hard guy on the estate. And he ended up becoming that. But in becoming the hard guy, he ended up becoming a drug dealer. He ended up becoming, got addicted to drugs to the point where he was addicted to heroin and still is to this day. And because of his childhood and dad affected him so much, he's like ruined my brother's life in a way.
But in that moment where your dad started that conversation with that comment about beating women, I imagine, or at some point, you just decided, I'm not going to be anything like this guy.
Oh, 100%. I decided that from a young age. Watching, my youngest memories are of domestic violence and family violence. And
do you remember having the thought, I'm not going to be like him?
100%. I remember seeing that and I was like, even though you don't know as a child, you know that's wrong. And you can see how much it affects everyone. There's tension in the room. There's literally physical violence happening in front of you. The woman I love, like my mom, is being hurt. And I knew from a young age I never wanted to do that or follow that. And then to hear that, as like a young adult, to go, that's how it's done. I knew as a kid that wasn't the way it's done. I also knew at that moment, that's the last I'll have to do with you. And I gave you your one shot and that's your start. That's your end with me, basically, yeah. So, yeah, in that moment I knew that I'll never be like that.
And you haven't seen him since? Not
seen him since. At the moment I don't know if he's dead or alive or what he's doing, if he's causing more chaos or what he's doing. I have no involvement with him at all. I barely did anyways, but yeah. At this moment, not at all.
Before we move on to the story and talk more about what you made of yourself from this childhood, can I also ask you about race? You mentioned being mixed race with Indian and British heritage. Was that a positive growing up? Did you suffer from racism on the estate? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so like growing up, it's always been hard. Like you feel like you're not connected to any race. Like growing up, there was racism on the estate I was at because you're tan kid, you're brown, you're different. The majority of people in my area was white at the time. So there was racism there from people at school, people in the street, and my brother would try and defend me from that or defend himself from that, and that's what led him kind of down his path as well. But yeah, there was racism growing up every day, and I had to live with a racist every day. So my stepdad, who my mom dated after my father, he had 2 kids with my mom. So I've got a younger sister and a younger brother. And I spent around 10 to 15 years of my life kind of with him. He wasn't always there. He was kind of in and out of our lives. But he was extremely racist. Yeah. Like
in what way? Can you give us some examples of the kind of things that you would hear?
So so he was also physically violent. Some of my earliest memories are of him also abusing my mother in front of me again. He would be, every time they get in an argument, he would always go at my mom with having kids that are of a race, of being Indian. And he would always say racial slurs towards myself or my brother or my mom who she dated or who she would get with. He would always watch TV, and if anyone of colour would be on TV, he would say racist stuff all the time. He hated me from the off. So like when I was younger, I don't actually remember this, but I've grown up with a huge scar like on my cheek. It's more faded now, but the scar, it went straight through. I can feel it on the other side of my cheek. And I didn't know how I had that, like how I grew up and got it. My mom always told me the cat did it, Charlie the cat. And I was like, it's a pretty strong cat. Let me tell you, is it like a Bengal tiger? If it's a cat, like it's a pretty strong cat. But I ended up talking to my brother, and he was in the room when it happened. And it turned out that my stepdad had used a sharp object to literally stab me in the cheek and rip down as a kid, just because I'm Indian, just because I'm half Indian, and for no other reason other than he hated that. And growing up...
How old were you, Daniel?
I must have been between 3 to 5, 3 to 6.
And you don't remember?
I have no recollection. No. I just know I had a scar, and then growing up, I would, like, on the inside, it would, like, still heal, or there was still issues with it. Now it's completely fine. But, yeah, like, I grew up with that, and I always wondered how I got that scar. Like, I was like... Yeah, my mom would always try and... I think she was just trying to look after me by trying to tell me, you know, there's a different reason to what it was. She still, to this day, struggles to say exactly what it is. My brother told me upright when I was in the room. I was still young, but I remember he did something to your face. It was, we don't know what object, but it was enough to pierce straight through my skin, through the other side and rip down.
Do you remember wishing that someone would come to protect you and your mum?
Always, yeah. Always wished they would. Always wished they would. And always, like, dreamed that there would be someone to come in.
You were hit with so much difficulty as a childhood. I know when I've spoken to Rachel on other episodes, we talk about adverse childhood experiences that are likely to result in poor mental health as an adult. And I think grief was up there, the loss of a parent, divorce, these kind of things. You had strangulation from a parent. You were stabbed by a parent. You had racial abuse. You had just your whole identity criticised and mocked for years. You're so positive now. You're a comedian. You're really upbeat. You're always smiling. Can you tell me, before you got to that positive place, what kind of impact this childhood had on you? Can you think about, you know, the effects psychologically?
Yeah, so growing up, I definitely suffered with depression. Depression and feeling of like feeling lost all the time. It's like I didn't have what everyone else had. You know, you'd be around friends and they have very normal families and very normal livelihoods. But I just always felt lost and always sad all the time. And I remember when I was younger, I'd always feel a lot of anger that would, be burn inside of me. And I was just really affected by this, mentally, because like, I didn't know, you can't really see a way how you can make things change and happen and whatnot.
You were saying you didn't really feel like you fitted in either, because being mixed race as well. So did you feel a bit sort of disoriented as well? Yeah,
disoriented, lost. Just, that feeling. I felt a lot of time. Yeah, a lot of time when I was younger, I felt super sad and down. And I'd say depression.
Were there people along the way though, or experiences or places that protected you from some of this trauma? There must have been some factors in your life somewhere along the line for you to have been able to somehow rise above some of this trauma.
Yeah, so person would be my mom, super, super inspirational mother. She wasn't perfect. She, of course, made some bad choices that would affect herself, and not only herself, the family as well, you know. But, of course, domestic violence and everything else is going to affect my mom. But also, she was always there for me. Always there, always positive, even in the tough times, always believed in what I could do. She was very free, and she'd kind of, I want to rule the world. You want to rule the world, you can do what you want, son. You can do it if you want.
Very encouraging.
Very encouraging, even though she didn't have the financial means. I've never grown up with any financial means to support my dreams. She always was there, like, in spirit, and also there to have, like, a conversation with. Also, I'm very proud of my sister, even though my sister at a young age got very affected from all this childhood trauma. She did have like 3 kids around about 20, so she was an underage teenage parent. But she changed her life around when she had kids. She was looking to go on the same path as what essentially my brother was going and what many people in our estate was going. But she changed her life around, and now she's looking after 3 kids. She's studying, she's working and whatnot. So I'm very proud of what she's achieved as well also, yeah. And even though my older brother, heroin addict in and out of prison, not the perfect character, he always instilled in me a sense of belief that you can do whatever you want. He didn't want me to follow the same path. He didn't set a great example, but he never wanted me to follow what he did.
So still a lot of camaraderie between the siblings and
Yeah.
with your mum. A lot of solidarity there.
Between us, yeah. Between the people that was affected, yeah. 100%. It was there. Like, that's all you've got in times of hopelessness is belief. Like, it can change. It will change. And, you know, like, it doesn't matter if your finances are there or if people can do many things for you. You can always do things yourself by believing in yourself and by pushing forward with.
Were there any teachers or extended family or friends as you got older who also would constitute protective factor in your life?
I did surround myself with good friends. I purposely wanted to hang around with people that had more ambition than I did or like what I had. Like I was always an ambitious person, but hang around with the right crowd. Like it's so easy at school to get carried away with the wrong people. You know, it seems really cool. It seems like the place to be, you know, do that. But I've seen where it starts and how it ends. So I essentially wanted to surround myself with people that wouldn't go that direction. So even at an early age, I was trying to make the good friend choices or the best friend choices I could. And I met a good group of people that was trying their best in the situation to make how we grew up change to be something better, essentially. Yeah.
So they were a positive influence on you.
Positive influence on me. And I didn't have many positive influences growing up. I would take it from not the usual places, I'd say. Like, I legit would watch movies. For example, Lord of the Rings. Massive fan of Lord of the Rings. When I say that, it sounds quite funny because you think of wizards, dwarves, and elves. But I'd watch movies like that, and the morals in the film, the moral compass of fellowship, bond. You know, they travel around Middle Earth. Perseverance, not giving up. Like, I didn't have a male role model to follow. I didn't have any model to follow, really, except for who I wanted to be and where I wanted to go. And you take it from, it can be from a book, it can be from a movie. If you haven't got that in, like, as a person, sometimes you don't. You can take it from a sort of character off TV. Like, if they look like somebody that you feel has great intentions and like people you can aspire to anything you want, really.
You're listening to Help Me, I'm a Comedian. I'm Ashwin Sedgar, and you've also been hearing from comedian Daniel Holt and psychologist Dr. Rachel Hannam. Rachel, when you were hearing Dan's stories, this could have gone very badly for him, those kind of experiences. Can you talk about the kind of effects those childhood experiences can have on a person?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's absolutely right. It could have gone so differently. That's why I'm really fascinated by, this notion of what we talk about in psychology is the protective factors, the things that allow a person to triumph over adversity and even grow after the trauma has subsided. So this term post-traumatic growth. Intelligence is another one. Do you consider yourself a fairly intelligent person, Daniel?
I would say emotionally intelligent. Yeah,
and that's actually even more predictive than IQ.
Yeah.
Emotional intelligence, which is strongly sort of genetically influenced, is a big predictor of resilience and post-traumatic growth. Do you think you have grown as a result of, like, has it given you wisdom? Has it given you compassion in some ways going through these experiences?
100%. Yeah, like I've seen some of the worst things you can maybe ever see, you know, in that, like, you're gonna see moments where, you know not to follow it. You know deep inside it's wrong, like, and you feel a sense of, I'm not gonna be this, I'm not gonna follow this, and feel sorry for the victims of what happened. I'm a victim myself of it, but it's weird because I don't like to see myself that way. I like to see myself as somebody who's
as the victor.
As a victor in the end of it, yeah. Like you can go through something and you can come out the other end, and
yes,
and you can take these things, and as negative as they are, you can put them forward like I'm doing now in a positive message to help others. Like, in anything that's happened to me negatively, I've always tried to change it around to be like, okay, cool, this happened, but how can we use it to give you more drive or change the world in some way or help someone else in another way. So it teaches you a lot of intelligence emotionally, maybe mentally, you would say. To me, it seems normal. Is like, I just kind of grew up in that way, but you always have to work on yourself 100%. Like, in these situations, you can't just change like that. It's not a magic potion or pill or anything.
It's a long journey.
It's a long journey of, like, changing and working on yourself.
Can I ask if it's affected your romantic relationships in any way, shape or form?
No, because I've seen exactly how it shouldn't be.
Yes.
And that's exactly what I won't do. It's the same as, like, my dreams to have a family and kids and be a father, because I've never I don't know what that's like. I didn't know what it's like to shave your beard or have your father to put aftershave on you or be a man around the house. I don't know how that all is, so I'm looking forward to that. But romantically, I know exactly what you shouldn't do. Yeah, I've not been shown like what a normal relationship is like, for sure. I've seen how a negative one can go.
You know what not to do, though.
Know what not to do, yeah. You know what to do.
Can I pick up on that idea? Because there's this golden rule that people talk about, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I think the Chinese version of that, the Confucian version, is don't do unto others what you would not have them do unto you. They start negatively. It's like your whole life has been almost negative. You know what you don't want to do. You know where you don't want to be. Not necessarily what you should emulate. Is that a healthy way to live your life, by what you don't want rather than what you do want, or are there any costs to it?
Well, I often say to my clients, have both lists at the front of your mind. You know, when they're looking, say, when they're dating, have your list of what you don't want and your list of what you do want. But I was really interested in what you said, Daniel, about as a kid, you would go into your room in the dark and sit and in your imagination try and visualize or manifest what you did want for your life and who you did want to be. I think you've just spontaneously cottoned onto something there that's, you know, part of quite a few sort of therapies, which is to use that adverse experience that kind of pushed you in this direction of creative visualization, you know, exposing yourself imaginally to a different, better way of being. And yeah, the fact that you did that quite spontaneously does show your emotional intelligence, even as a kid. One of the biggest skills a good parent has is emotional self-regulation, which neither your father nor your stepfather had. In fact, they used drugs and alcohol to self-soothe and self-regulate, and we all know the pain that leads to. So if parents can avoid substance abuse and learn how to emotionally self-regulate, everything else is going to flow from that.
How do we emotionally self-regulate? What are some tips?
So, I mean, in relationships, once your endocrine system has started pumping out those stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, you're at risk of aggression and rage and even violence, which is what you were on the receiving end of, Daniel. So I teach my clients to catch themselves early before they're too emotionally flooded with these stress hormones, and practice mindfulness, mindful breathing, grounding, maybe take themselves away. You know, we often put toddlers in timeout. I tell parents to put themselves in timeout if they can, because we need to buy ourselves time to come back to calm. And since you're a comedian, I'm with two comedians here, I'll also mention that using humour in relationships is such a great strategy for diffusing the tension when there's conflict. If you can lighten the moment with your partner or with your child when there's conflict by finding the absurd, finding the funny, taking some of the stress out of it through humour is a really good tactic. So you'll be a great dad.
Yeah, thank you. I completely agree with that, with using humour, like during difficult situations. So essentially I found myself, I didn't know it at the time, but being sort of a comedian for the family. So essentially if moments where it get really serious and heated and, you know, it's going to kick off, I'd try and diffuse it. And once it calmed down, I'd love to do... have you seen the movie The Mask?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like he walks really funny, he does like really long strides. I'd just get up and do like little mini performances.
Physical humour.
Physical humour. Sometimes even, the situation was dark, but, you know, finding the funny in there just to relieve the tension. And seeing my mum go to a point where it's like she's scared to it's calm down to making a laugh was one of the best things I loved. Like like my mum's laugh, I'll never ever forget growing up, and like that inspires me to want to be a comedian now, because I love just making people laugh. Like, you know, people come to the comedy shows and they can be gone through anything in their day. It reminds me of that moment when I was a kid and I'd make my mum happy in a moment of real. You know, you're like in real... That
was one of the few things you could do for her because you were just a kid.
Yeah, just a kid, yeah. And it's just breaking that tension and taking away from that little moment of, this is reality.
What you went through might put some person into years of therapy and needing help. You've addressed it with a positive attitude, pick-me-up kind of ambition and attitude, and you took up boxing for a while and you've got comedy in your life. But are there any legacies of that childhood that you haven't quite dealt with that might be a blind spot for you now because someone else has to point them out who's looking from the outside, like a girlfriend or a therapist? Are there any habits? Are you jumpy? Do you struggle with people pleasing or wanting to make everyone laugh because that worked for your mum? Are there any legacies of that childhood that you still need to address, you think?
Yeah, there's definitely stuff that I want to work on. Yeah, and there always is. Like, there's no way that I've just magically been positive and everything's perfect. But yeah, the one thing that affects me a lot is just, I would say the most, is the fact that I had no control to stop it all from happening. And I find myself, I daydream a hell of a lot, let's say. And I daydream a lot, and especially about these moments about, like, I would say, yeah, like changing them. Maybe probably like one thing that affected me is like getting revenge back. Getting revenge back and like on my stepdad and my dad, getting revenge. And that's probably one of the biggest negatives that I have is like I want to be like not do the same as what they did, but like show like get revenge to go like to give you like maybe some element of power back.
Power because you were so powerless.
So powerless.
You're watching your mother who you loved being threatened and beaten and hurt, and you can't do anything. It's so horrible.
But the area of power you can get back is by being successful. That's the way. My way of going. Okay, this is how. I wouldn't say to beat them, but my way of getting power back is by going. I'm not going to be anything like you. I'll not be an aggressive drunk that beats up their kids and family. I will not be racist. I'll not be any part of them. That's a way of me beating them by being successful. That's the way to change it.
These thoughts of revenge that you just talked about, are they intrusive thoughts? Do they kind of just pop in, or do you manufacture them deliberately?
They pop in. They pop in a few times. Yeah, they pop in, and they can pop in when I maybe have a conversation with someone, and like I always like to meet someone. I'm like, lovely to meet you, be friendly. You can be what you want to be. And then sometimes when I meet someone who's let's say not so nice from the off, they want to put you down. And all this stuff, that does get at me. That comes back to, I reckon, my childhood, where it's like, why be like that? Why put people down like they deserve, like they don't deserve that? Like, so kind of an element of like revenge in that sense, I'd say. That's probably one thing I'd want to work on myself. But the best part I would say with that element is putting that negative, like right, I want to show everyone like that revenge in a way. You put it into a positive by changing your life around and going, I'm not going to be anything like you guys. Like I'm going to try and be a successful person, and what you did when I was younger, I won't be the repeat of that. Let's say that's probably the one negative I'd say I'd take from that. Yeah, like sometimes I'll have intrusive daydreams of like revenge and wanting to fight back and defend my mom or defend people that defend myself in those moments. But yeah,
I mean, there's a natural protest in a child going through something like that. Natural sort of anger and defense that wants to kick in, the fight that wants to kick in, but you can't fight a big drunk man when you're a little kid.
Yeah.
And so that fight energy kind of has nowhere to go. And so there's a theory that, it's still in there somewhere, that fight energy. And it's interesting that it comes out just occasionally in these moments.
Yeah.
And I just want to say one thing that might come back to you later about, it's almost like you've rebelled by being good and kind and gentle.
That's the rebellion.
That's your rebellion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The thing about rebellion, which is wonderful, I was a real rebel as a teenager, is that when we rebel against our childhood experiences by saying, I'm going to be nothing like that, in a sense, psychologically, we're still subject to the same thing. We can either conform or rebel, but it's still those memories or experiences that have got the power over us. It's quite a thing to extract out, like just those intrusive thoughts tell me maybe there's still, it's still a mental object that you rebel against, but sometimes it grabs hold of you. And so the work is to kind of unhook from that thing being the influence, either conformity or rebellion. One day you won't have those intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's like defending the little guy or the little
defending
bit.
a little guy.
It's defending the person. Yeah, it's like the same. Like my mom had no one to defend her. I didn't.
Yeah.
It's if I see the same process again, it's always like I always feel like I want to be at the defense of somebody who doesn't have that.
It's powerless.
Yeah, who's powerless. Yeah.
So you hate watching bullying now?
Hate watching bullying. I hate that sort of behaviour in general. I believe it's weak from here on out, like, I want to take the reins and move into fatherhood and everything else and enjoy it my way with a more positive outlook to life and everything else. Yeah.
You've been listening to comedian Daniel Holt and psychologist Rachel Hannam. Thank you to you both for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.